Where should I start? Because I'm really starting to go crazy. I want to know if any of my friends in New England have experienced something like this. If you have, please, I beg you, tell me. Contact me, okay? Sorry, I'm not feeling too well. Let's start from the beginning. I've always loved snow. Since I was a child, I loved playing in the snow. If school was closed because of snow, that was even better. When I was young, I wasn't afraid of the cold. I could run out into the snow as early as 6 a.m. Later, I studied in Boston for 4 years. I spent another 7 years elsewhere in New England. I can't stand the cold at my age. But I still love snuggling under the covers with a cinnamon roll, sipping hot cocoa, and watching the snow fall outside, although now I live in an old 3-story house outside the city. On snowy days, I can see it all through the window. There was only an abandoned church and monastery. But maybe I just have a filter for snowy days. No matter how run down the building, it always looks so cozy in the snow. But tonight, that cozy feeling was shattered by a strange atmosphere. I remember I stayed up late watching a game. I had a bit to drink. I didn't have time to freshen up and just fell asleep on the couch. It was the same in the dream as in reality. The sky was dim. Snow was falling, and the church across the street lit up. But soon I realized this wasn't a dream. This church, which had been abandoned ever since I moved here 3 years ago, was confusingly lit up. I did my best to wake up from the drunkenness. I washed my face. I went back to the window. I wasn't mistaken, the light was indeed on. Because in the next half minute, one by one, the streetlights went out as if each was losing power. Only the church's light flickered in the snowstorm. Just when I was really curious, and wanted to wipe the snow off the window, to see if there really was someone inside the church, a creaking sound came from the entrance of our house. This is the downside of an old house, but at least I can tell if our roommate has come back. But when I thought it was my roommate turning around, I didn't hear any key sounds outside the door, or the sound of a doorknob turning. It seemed someone had stopped outside our door and was not moving. Did they forget their key? Perhaps I still hadn't sobered up. Carelessly, I grabbed the spare key and went to the front door. But a very pungent stench instantly sobered me up. This smell is not only disgusting, but it's so strong that my eyes are watering and I can't keep them open. I quickly stepped back in disgust. But when I saw my roommate's cat hiding behind me, for standing on end, staring at the door, I started to feel relieved. Good thing I didn't open the door. But then there was a sudden loud bang on the door. It scared both me and the cat. Then came a second and a third sound. Later, the glass doors and windows on our balcony were successively hit with frantic banging. It was as if countless unseen things were trying to break in. I was so scared that I huddled under the dining table with the cat, until those sounds completely disappeared. Only then did I dare to climb out again. What's strange is, there were no handprints left on any of the windows, or any other marks. Instead, through the balcony, I could see the church more clearly. On the window, which was glowing, there was a mark of a number. That mark was so large, it looked like someone had used several buckets of ink, written on top, intentionally shown to me. But the next second, a gust of snow swept past. When the church reappeared from the blizzard, the lights were already off. I didn't see the number again. However, I finally understood. Why does this scene feel so familiar? It was just last week. That is, the night 7 days ago. I saw that mark as well. Until just now, I thought it was a dream. At that time, the church had the number 49 written on it. The next moment, when I came to my senses again, I found myself lying in bed. I was looking at the sunlight coming through the window. My roommate's cat was lying next to me. It was sleeping very peacefully. I guess I must have had a nightmare. Taking advantage of the fact that my roommate hadn't gotten up yet, I quickly rushed to the bathroom to freshen up. I also planned to be the first one to use the coffee machine today, but when I got to the kitchen, I found that the window, which should have been checked, the window that should have been deadbolt from the inside, was forced open. Cold wind kept pouring into the kitchen. Not only that, a chill went right through my slippers, giving my left foot a nasty freeze. Looking down, I saw a huge patch of snow on the floor, shaped like a deer hoof, right in the center of the kitchen. The melted snow water was giving off a foul smell. Last night, I smelled it through the door in my dream. Wait, That wasn't just a dream. That strange premonition surged in my heart again. There's no doubt about it, someone must have come in during the snowstorm. Something's definitely hidden in this snowy night. That thing is on a countdown for some unknown reason. Anyway, we still have 42 days left. Good. I'm pretty good at adjusting my emotions. After recording the time, of all the strange things I've seen, I cleaned up the snow in the kitchen, fixed the window, took a hot shower, relaxed myself. I don't know if it's just a psychological effect or what, but that smell gradually faded away. I can't smell it anymore, but my intuition tells me that thing has already entered our house, and they hadn't left. However, after my roommates gradually woke up, especially when they dragged me outside to shovel snow, the atmosphere became lighter. It seemed like they hadn't heard any of those banging noises last night, and they had never smelled that foul stench. Anna, as usual, would occasionally joke about her boyfriend. She would tease Nathan about the injury he got from playing basketball. She'd mock him for not being able to shovel more snow. Only Sean noticed that something was off with me. Sean quickly took me back to the room. He made me some hot chocolate, but I don't plan on telling him anything right now. The sky is slowly darkening. If tonight I see the number 41 on the church through the window again, then I'll be certain that something is definitely wrong. So there's no game tonight. And I'll stay up all night, at least watching the window, until 3 o'clock. Until 3 a.m. I'm sorry. I almost forgot to update on what I've seen and heard. Everything has been normal these past couple of days, except the car broke down in the snow. I had to send it to the parking lot for emergency repairs. And then there's my cat. It had its first fight with my roommate's cat in 3 years. We had to take them both to the vet, but other than that, everything's really been normal. If it were a normal day, I might think I'm having a bit of bad luck, but after that experience that night, I feel that, as long as I don't encounter any more strange, supernatural things, those small accidents aren't such a big deal. I just hope the winter ahead will be like this. I saw him. I stayed up all night on my project report. I've been working on it since last night. Just as I was about to close my laptop and go to sleep, I saw something outside my desk window, right in front of me. It was something hidden in the wind and snow. It was right there. It was terrifyingly tall. It was about 3 meters high. Where it was, all the streetlights dimmed. Although it had a human-like torso, its skin was wine red. Or perhaps more like the color of old scars. Its head was human, but its lower body was deer legs. A large portion of it emerged from behind the church. I don't know how long he had been watching me. What was most strange was that within a radius of several meters around him, the entire block was empty. It was snowing. The moment I made eye contact with him, he gave me an expression as if saying, "You finally noticed me." That long horse-like face of his broke into a wide grin. The corners of my mouth kept stretching up to the top of my head. It felt like my entire head was split in half. I quickly turned off the desk lamp. I drew the curtains. I crawled under the blanket, all in one go. I had barely slept for 2 hours, when my roommate Carla woke me up. She's still so headstrong in doing things her own way. She just barged into my room, shouting that she needed to borrow my car to find her boyfriend, Joey. "Don't forget, who helped you with your car breakdown a few days ago? Don't be so reluctant." She kept talking, not caring whether I was awake or not. She started rummaging through my nightstand. "And also, Joey didn't charge a single penny for fixing your car. I can't do anything about her." So I had to stretch out my hand and tell her, "The key is on my desk." But when she opened the curtains halfway, I immediately got goosebumps all over. One person stood up and grabbed her hand. She was also startled by my action. "Why you? What are you doing? It's so dark in here. If I don't open the curtains, I can't see anything. I can't find the key." I made up some excuse and said, "Hey, I still need to sleep. If you pull the curtains open, I won't be able to sleep." "Wait a moment." Then, relying on my memory, I found my keys. I gave her a few instructions. Then I let her leave the room. I heard the sound of the front door closing. I secretly peeked outside through the gap in the curtains. It was snowing again outside, but the half-human, half-deer creature was no longer behind the church. But I watched Carla drive my car away from the empty lot. leaving a stark snow print on the ground. Sean and I have called Carla 3 times already, and sent her at least 10 messages. She hasn't replied. She said she'd be back by 8 tonight to return the car. Sean leaned in and whispered to me, "Hey, you don't think Joey's actually a human trafficker, do you?" "Don't be ridiculous." I replied to him immediately, but out of concern, I also sent Joey a message. Joey replied very quickly, "Huh. My girlfriend hasn't come home, she left 2 hours ago. I haven't heard from her since then." I went to bed early last night, because Joey was coming over at 8 a.m. today. Kara has disappeared. Joey can't find her either. We haven't seen her come back all night. The car, just vanished mysteriously in the snowstorm. Joey just arrived. We immediately called the police. We reported to the police the last time we saw Carla, and gave them all the details. Although Joey and I firmly believed that Carla had an accident, Officer Gavin completely dismissed it. Do you think anyone would risk going out in such heavy snow to commit a crime? Leaving the scene might even be difficult. The car won't even start. That's his reason. So, when he stumbled out the door with his big belly, Joey and I didn't have much hope. However, that day, the phone calls were quite a lot. Kara's family called. Classmates called. My best friends calls, one after another, calling me and Joey. Plus, I had to check in with the police from time to time. Before I knew it, it was 8 or 9 p.m. But a very, very strange feeling was growing in my heart. The calls were becoming fewer and farther between. My roommates and Joey's condition. It seemed to get easier and easier. By evening, everyone was even happily drinking together, eating cakes and singing songs. How could they be so happy? Until Joey went out and left, leaving behind the words, "I had so much fun today." I was suddenly jolted awake. They've all forgotten about Kara. I know my thoughts are absurd, but that's the way it is. I asked my roommate all day. I asked Nathan. I asked Sean. I asked everyone. In short, not a single person remembers that Kara ever existed. Even yesterday, those friends and family of Kara, who called to ask about my progress in the search, I called them all back, but either they said I had the wrong person, or the number was disconnected. Even Joey doesn't remember anything at all. I searched the entire room, carrying Kara's name, looking for clues. The result is that her bedroom is filled with clutter. In the bathroom, her toiletries are gone. In the kitchen, her dishes are completely nowhere to be found. I feel like I'm going crazy. My roommate thinks I'm going crazy too. They told me, we've always lived together as 5. There is no such thing as a university student roommate, Kara. I don't believe it. I really don't believe it, because tonight, I saw Kara again. She was standing in the snow, standing in the church graveyard. She stared at me expressionlessly, and her forehead was marked with several cuts. The shape of the wounds was a number. I no longer have any time off. I have to let life take a backseat to work. But my attention has never left these strange events. From driving to the office, to getting off work around 3 p.m., whenever I have a moment, I search online. I searched for all kinds of keywords, on both reliable and unreliable websites. Deer Hoof Blizzard Demon. Even my manager and colleagues have started to plan some kind of pre-winter holiday office team building. I've been searching too, but after a few drinks, this group of guys who only deal with code every day are already drunk beyond recognition. The whole floor is in chaos. I just feel that searching for something in this situation is like noise in my ears. I pretended to have eaten some dessert and said I needed to go to the restroom to wipe my mouth. I finally escaped the crowd and hid in an empty restroom to wash my face. But when I looked up again, the restroom lights were all off. I frantically turned around to find the switch. But then I heard the sound of the faucet again. I quickly looked up and saw the faucet right there, turning on and off. On and off. But it's a sensor faucet. I know, that thing has even followed me to my company. But thinking about everything that happened to Carla, it's like no one remembers. I fought back my fear, and took out my phone to record the faucet's movements. The second I stopped recording, I burst through the door and back into the crowd. Even though it was noisy all around, I still heard from the restroom a triumphant burst of laughter. To be safe, I found an out-of-order sign and put it on the restroom door. Hopefully, no one will go in. I also uploaded the recorded video to YouTube afterward. When the party ended, it was completely dark outside. Is this what winter is like? I was exhausted, both physically and mentally, as I drove back home. The abandoned church stood in the snow, just like usual. I deliberately kept my eyes closed, not wanting to look at it. I lowered my head and walked toward the apartment. I was suddenly slapped back to reality. It was Nathan. He had one hand on my shoulder, and the other holding a shovel. Do you know I called you 3 times? What were you thinking about? So lost in thought. Oh, sorry. I just told a little white lie. Today, work was so exhausting. What about you? What are you doing here? He simply brushed the ice off his beard. Smiling, he replied, just shoveling snow. It seems like it's going to snow even more tomorrow, so I'm clearing it now in advance. I looked around. The roads have been cleared in places where people live. Everyone is preparing for the first snowstorm that's coming. But, it's getting dark now. Aren't you going home? He smiled again. No need, there's just a little left. Hey, wait until Anna finishes cooking and calls me. I'll go back. If you have time, bring a shovel too. Unfortunately, I declined. It was clear that Nathan was a bit disappointed, but there was nothing I could do. I was just too tired and too sleepy. Thanks to his girlfriend, Anna prepared dinner for us today. They even decorated the whole restaurant to make it feel really warm. The 5 of us, my roommates, had dinner together. That was already a month ago. To be precise, there were originally 6 of us. I was lost in these thoughts. I fell asleep on the couch. About an hour or 2 later, Sean woke me up with a whistle. If you don't get up soon, I might just eat your portion too. I blinked my eyes and sat up, and saw Lila. Anna and Nathan had already taken their seats. By the table, which was full of food, they were looking at me as we ate and chatted in the snowy night. The warmth filled the room again. No matter how heavily the snow falls outside the window, after dinner, everyone went back to their own tasks. Nathan went outside to clear the last of the snow from the carport. Anna and Sean tidied up the kitchen. Lila went back to her room and tinkered with her computer. I chose to lie down on the sofa for a little while longer. I felt like I had found that childhood feeling again, that sense of a snowy night. I was woken by frantic screams. Rushing downstairs, I saw our front door was open. The cold wind from the snowy night poured into the entryway. Anna. She was in her pajamas, barefoot, frantically dragging a large, stiff, blackened object in the snow. I grabbed a coat and ran outside. Only then did I see what it was. It was Nathan's body. Anna was holding Nathan's body, already frozen outside for an hour. I couldn't bear to watch, but I couldn't persuade her. I could only cover her with 2 coats. There was nothing else I could do. We already called 911 in the heavy snow, but after 40 to 50 minutes, we still hadn't seen a single police car. Suddenly, we heard Lila shout, "Look over there, look over there." Anna and I turned our heads. What we saw was a leading fire truck. The people inside got out and cleared the snow from the street. Then, the police and ambulances arrived one after another. The first 2 officers to get out of the car rushed directly toward Anna and Lila. The older officer who got out from the back seat walked toward Sean and me with his belly sticking out. "Hey, you two, hey. Have we met before?" I carefully examined his face. It seems like I have indeed seen him before. This beard, this hair color, this belly. Did we report a case to the police a few days ago? I have an impression of it. What was that missing person case again, right? I'm also trying to recall and can't quite remember clearly. The police officer spoke again. He said, "We'll handle this case, it's official business." But usually, at this time of year, criminals wouldn't venture out in such heavy snow. Such heavy snow, they probably wouldn't even be able to leave the scene. His words instantly enlightened me. I had indeed seen him. He was the police officer who handled the contact when my former roommate, Kara, went missing, but he seems to have no recollection of it. Sean does too, even I almost forgot. But it was just a few days ago. Sean noticed I was deep in thought, so he hurried over to check on me. Police and firefighters managed the scene. About 50 minutes later, their cars, carrying the bodies, left one by one. We watched until the last car disappeared into the snow. We returned home in silence. We made breakfast. I stayed with Anna in the living room, lost in thought. The atmosphere was colder than the outside temperature. Until Anna's fatigue finally overcame her sadness, she returned to her room to sleep. Looking at Lila and Sean, still sitting on the couch, lost in thought. Thinking about what I had just discussed with the police, I couldn't help but speak up. At least, while Nathan has not yet been forgotten. Do you remember? Before Nathan, we had a roommate named Kara who also went missing. She disappeared. Sean didn't react. Lila, on the other hand, widened her eyes. I feel like there's something terrifying that wants our lives. It wants to take us one by one, and it's to completely erase us. To the point where no one remembers us, because I saw him. He had a very long face. His lower body was. I don't know if I should. Just as I became more and more anxious, Lila patted me and said, "I believe you." I slowly raised my head. I saw Sean was also looking at me. I also believe what Officer Gahan just said. It felt like it triggered a memory. I'm not sure, but it just felt wrong, and... He said that, and pulled out his phone. He opened his social media app. I came across this last night. It's a selfie. The poster's profile is completely inaccessible, but the location shown is our apartment. And the time is just a few days ago. It's Kara taking a selfie with our cat. The caption says, "Before I go out to meet my boyfriend, one last hug for my furry little darling." And in the kitchen behind her, there stood a long-faced deer-hoofed person. We spent almost 3 hours, going over the posts we had shared earlier, revisiting all the photos and videos. As more and more evidence came to light, Lila and Sean became increasingly convinced. We once had a roommate. But she was taken by something. Nathan, who died mysteriously today, might have been taken the same way, and it wasn't until we realized this, that we discovered there was a noticeable empty space in all of our group photos. We also started finding more and more unfamiliar cups at home, books and utensils. It's as if the deceased Carla is desperately trying to prove that she existed. Before reaching a consensus, we begin to try the methods we see in movies. We use them recklessly, like taking photos with our phones and cameras everywhere, to see if we can capture things the human eye can't see, or prepare some salt and lead products. Things like bullets, perhaps, to make weapons to defend against the hoofed demon creature. In the end, the most useful might be Lyra, who started using an online document to record what we've seen and heard, because she suspects that, soon enough, we might even forget about Nathan. We were busy and unproductive until evening. Suddenly, we heard from upstairs, the sound of pounding feet and shouting. It was Anna. The three of us hadn't even reacted yet, when she was already running downstairs barefoot in her pajamas, and burst out the front door again. "What's wrong with her?" Sean was the first to stand up and follow. Lila and I also threw on our coats and followed closely behind. Outside, everything was still covered in snow. Then we saw Anna, running straight towards our neighbor across the street. The old man was busy shoveling snow. Seeing a group of people rushing towards him, he dropped his shovel in fright. We haven't caught up with Anna yet. She grabbed the uncle's collar first. She yelled, "Get away from here." The uncle, unsure whether he was panicked or angry, replied, "Lady, are you alright? This is in front of my house. Because you're standing at the spot where my boyfriend died. Do you know that? Get out." The uncle listened. He quickly stepped back a few paces. He walked to the road and said, All right, I'll go clean somewhere else first. After all, leaving a pile of snow here, the car will slip, you know. We can't go anywhere." Anna, however, was still screaming, "Then get the hell out of here now. Otherwise, I'll curse you to die here just like your boyfriend." Her words hadn't even finished, when I suddenly realized. A strange light flashed from an odd direction. I immediately threw myself onto Sean. Right after that, an old sedan skidding on the snow spun around and came flying toward us. I instantly threw the old man next door under the car. Blood splattered. It landed on the snow on the ground. It landed on Anna's face. And it landed on me, as I held Sean. The neighbor in the car was crushed beyond recognition. but there was no one driving the car. Why did Lila, who was standing last, say with trembling lips, "Isn't that Anna's car parked by the church?" The police took Anna away. Only Sean, Lila, and I were left in the house. We couldn't sleep, especially when we heard real-time updates on the city news app about a police car returning from our side to downtown that accidentally fell into the water by the bridge. It made us even more uneasy. If it was Anna in the car above, it shouldn't be possible, but what else could it be? We decided to stay in the living room and not go anywhere, taking turns to keep watch. This feeling is so strange and so ridiculous. I never thought our home would be so full of danger. I never thought the winter snow that accompanied my childhood would be so terrifying. I drifted in and out of sleep until 4 a.m. I seemed to hear a knocking sound. Then I slowly opened my eyes. The house was still quiet. Lila, my previous shift's partner, was standing by the TV window, looking out at the church cemetery. The light from a street lamp shines through the snow, casting a glow on her face. Her expression looks even more strange. She noticed that I got up and, in a hoarse voice, asked me, "Did you see it?" I leaned closer and asked, "See what?" She pointed at the cemetery. When I saw the scene he was pointing to, I was certain that Anna was also in trouble. I saw 4 people standing in the snow, and on their heads, there were numbers carved, bleeding. For the next 3 or 4 days, or roughly 3 or 4 days, the heavy snow kept falling without stopping. The city center might be fine, but in the outskirts of our town, everything has come to a standstill. The children here can't go out to school, and we can't go out to work, or buy any daily necessities. We are almost completely stuck in this old house. Gradually, our alarms and phones, computers and other timekeeping devices, started malfunctioning inexplicably, or the times didn't match up, or they just crashed completely. We could only count the time ourselves. That feeling was truly suffocating. We dragged the mattresses into the living room to look out for each other. We use a little bit of our remaining food and water every day, praying that the snow will stop soon, and that this nightmare will end quickly. Every day, the topics we talk about go from deliberately seeking light-hearted subjects to becoming increasingly dull. Because the more we talk, the more we realize this house may have never been at peace. 3 years ago, Sean and I decided to move here. At the time, we were really excited, because we thought, at such a low price, we could live in such a large house. It was so big that all 5 of us didn't feel cramped. It seemed like an absolute steal. At first, Meredith, Hannah, Kelly, and I were the first to move in. As horror movie fans, Hannah and Kelly fell in love with the place on the first day. They adored the typical New England old house with its secrets. There were hidden passages, and all sorts of strange sculptures and portraits. It was like their paradise. What attracted me the most was something that has already been removed. A brass bell. It was hanging in the living room at the time. As expected, it was probably something the previous owner used to summon servants. But it was this inconspicuous thing that first triggered the disturbance. It wasn't long after moving in that Meredith started suffering from severe insomnia. At first, she didn't intend to say anything. But in the morning, with 2 dark circles under her eyes, looking like a zombie, shuffling back and forth, everyone could tell something was wrong, but her reason was even stranger. She thought our house was haunted. She said she often heard footsteps in the hallway at midnight. Because of the old, worn wooden floorboards, each step creaked so clearly. And along with the footsteps, there was usually that bell, ringing on and off. But every time, she would pluck up her courage to go and check. There was no one in the living room. I initially dismissed it. Tell her, have you ever considered that it's my rather fat cat? I also often hear it walking around, making a lot of noise. I also often see it knocking things over in the house. Initially, Meredith accepted my explanation, but another month passed. She said she was certain that wasn't my cat, because things were getting worse. When she was home alone, she not only saw the streetlight across the road mysteriously go out, but also experienced strange changes in the water pressure. She even encountered the family clock and pictures, falling and shattering without any external force. Falling and shattering. However, the bold Hannah and her group said, they had also encountered strange things, but they didn't worry about it at all. The reason being, it's an old house. Anything could malfunction. Meredith, however, could no longer bear it. She moved out. I still remember when she was dragging her luggage away, she quietly left me her last words. Take care. Keep in touch. Oh, by the way, I listened to it again seriously last night. That sound of footsteps didn't seem like it was from a person. More like the sound of an animal's hooves. Stepping on the wooden floor. You need to pay more attention. It seems our time has returned to normal. I don't know. Is this related to our resistance last night? But what's confirmed is, last night was indeed rough. We continued to conserve electricity by lighting candles. We huddled together in the living room to sleep. We took turns keeping watch. We kept our eyes fixed on the church. This time, we all saw the cloven-hoofed man. He stood motionless in the graveyard. It felt like he had lost his malice. He just stood quietly in the snow. But I quickly realized there was no malice. Humph, that was a deception. Just after I finished my watch, I fell fast asleep. Sean immediately woke me up. Before you went to sleep, he was still there, right? I had to open my eyes again and say, you mean that monster? Yes. I saw it. It didn't move for 2 hours. Then it moved. Sean interrupted me. I mean, it's gone now. Vanished. Sean's words startled me awake. And woke Lila up too. The two of us leaned by the window. Indeed, in those 10 seconds while we were switching shifts, the deer-hoofed person disappeared. And for us, not being able to see him, was even more unsettling. Lena immediately questioned Sean. You prepared a gun with lead shot, right? Sean said yes. And salt. He nodded and was about to get up to get it from the kitchen. But before he took a step, our candles went out one after another. The overhead light, which had been off, began to flicker on and off. But in less than half a second, the back door made the same knocking sound I had initially heard. Lila flinched in fear at first, then asked us, should we go over? Sean gave an affirmative answer. The gun is over there too. He's still that bold. He relit a candle and walked at the front. The two of us followed closely behind, but when we turned the corner of the hallway, Sean seemed to see something. Outside the back door's glass partition, he froze. Lila, scared, shrank behind me and asked, Is it that monster? She's outside, knocking on the door. No, it's not. It's Anna. Even Sean's voice is shaking this time. Anna, I'm protecting Lila while asking Sean. Yes, it's Anna. She's banging her head against our glass door. Now it's all blood, all blood. I couldn't hold myself back anymore and turned down the hallway. I saw that outside the door, there were indeed torn clothes. Anna was repeatedly smashing her head against our glass door. Then she suddenly stopped. She started grinning at me and Sean. Her mouth stretched all the way to her forehead, just like that Wendigo. My head felt like it was about to split in two. We still hadn't shaken off the fear. A sudden, frantic running sound came from upstairs. Lila screamed. Then, from the kitchen, the sound of pots and pans crashing to the floor. Then came the sound of water from the bathroom. The banging on the front door kept getting louder. Sean cursed under his breath. Have they all gotten in? Hurry, grab something. Though I don't believe in the stuff from movies, I still hurried over to the dining table. I picked up the gun and the salt that had been prepared and handed them over. Almost at the same time, the back door was smashed open. The moment Sean got the salt, he immediately threw it at the doorway. But he missed. The sound in the room caused everything to fall silent. As we turned in confusion, we discovered the hoofed figure standing behind Lila. The creature, about 2 or 3 meters tall, lowered its body. Smiling, it loomed over the three of us. Lila dodged. I yelled loudly. Then I drew the gun still in my hand. I aimed straight at the monster's forehead. The gunshot was deafening in the room. Unfortunately, I missed. It retreated into the shadows. He disappeared. But the good news is, he's hiding. He must be really afraid of lead bullets. That's why he's hiding. The house became calm again. It also felt safer. Until this morning. he didn't give up. He came back, and it was while I was on watch. He slowly circled around from behind the church. This time, he didn't laugh wildly. Instead, he stared at me with a fierce look. I wasn't scared. I just tightened my grip on the gun. If the events of 4 days ago happen again, I wanted him to suffer the consequences immediately. But he didn't move. He just stood there. His mouth was slightly open. It looked like he was trying to say something. No, he was trying to say something. I was some distance away from him, but I heard every word he said clearly. I almost heard the voice directly in my head. I shook my head vigorously, to clear my head. I suddenly realized that the voice came from my own muttering. Bad news, we're almost out of food and water. Good news, the snow is finally letting up. We got in touch with the person delivering the supplies. We sent out Lila, the fastest, to the pickup point. She went to collect and return the supplies quickly. After all, if something really happens, she's the most likely to escape. But just as she was coming back with bags in hand, and opened the door, one of our cats dashed out. That cat is called Sushi. It was the cat Anna and Nathan used to have. It's strange, Sean could barely catch it. Then we saw Sushi running into the street. Isn't that little guy afraid of the cold? I thought for a moment and said, since Anna and Nathan are no longer here, the kitten has been acting very strangely. He's probably been waiting for this moment for a long time. Should we pay attention to him? Of course, Lila put down the last pack of food. She said we can't afford to lose any more companions, right? After saying that, she rushed out the door again. Don't worry, it's very safe during the day. I'll go bring the cat back right now. We didn't stop her. She'd already followed Sushi across the street. But I still felt something was strange. Sushi seemed to deliberately run towards the church, as if luring Lila there. But remembering Lila's words, seeing the snow gradually calm down, and it was broad daylight, I really shouldn't be this nervous. I just saw Sushi go into the alley behind the church. Lila followed him in, but then Lila came back, walking backward. It wasn't Sushi that crawled out of the alley. It was the deer-hoofed man. He was hunched over, looking down at Lila. This is bad. I yelled and dragged Sean out. The surrounding residents were outside collecting supplies. I estimated there were 20 or 30 people. But no matter how Sean and I screamed for help, they seemed completely isolated from us. Luckily, Lila didn't let us down. She ran back immediately. The creature couldn't keep up with her speed. Sean's pace wasn't slow either. Once I pass, I'll have to cross the street. But a snowplow suddenly blocked our way. We waited for the vehicle to pass. The stag-horned man, who had been left behind by Lila by dozens of meters, was now right on her tail. There's no time, the gun. I was frantically slapping Sean. Sean immediately rushed back into the house to grab the gun, but when he turned back, Lila was already in his arms. Her skin and muscles melted like wax, slowly dissolving into the body of the stag man. Seeing this, I instinctively vomited. By the time Sean returned, cursing and holding the gun, there's nothing left anymore. The stag man is gone. Lila is gone. It's just the two of us, panicking. We don't fit in with the crowd. The snow is getting lighter. The wind is dying down. The outskirts of the city have come back to life. People come and go, but Sean and I feel the sense of despair growing stronger. Today, many schools resumed classes. Sean's boss also started calling him to come to work. But he still took a leave. He saw the video of what I went through at the company. He knows that leaving this building doesn't mean we're safe. Only by staying together can we protect each other. 7 p.m. When night fell, the snow outside stopped, but the temperature dropped to an unusually cold level. It was set to Fahrenheit, -4 degrees. We were both carrying guns, watching the wind clear the snow outside the house. It was already almost 11:20, and the Wendigo appeared again. Sean grabbed my shirt, and told me not to rush inside. I looked closely. That monster seemed to be showing off on purpose. It was already standing directly at the entrance of our house, smiling and waving its hand, waiting for us to return. Suddenly, it opened its massive, bloodied mouth. Leaning against the wall, it charged toward us. Sean shoved me aside this time. He raised his gun and fired. The gunshot exploded in the winter night. Sean loaded the gun in the echo. It was the second shot. The third shot, the fourth shot. This time, the monster didn't dodge. It took all 4 hits directly. It screeched and writhed, then fell. The moment its massive body hit the ground, it turned into a pile of snow. It spilled onto the wooden floor of the house. I cautiously approached. I used the snow shovel to gently tap the snow on the ground. We did it. We actually did it. He's dead. I turned around excitedly, but saw Sean lying in the snow. His body was covered in blood, a bullet wound bleeding profusely. What's going on? I don't understand. Could it backfire? I was about to put down the shovel in my hand, and bend down to take a look, but then I realized what I was holding was our gun. I haven't spoken to my sister in years. We live in the same city. But the family conflict between us is quite serious. As for why, it's really my fault. After all, if your younger brother has gradually stolen nearly 100,000 yuan from you, money for raising a child, in the end, you would definitely have a falling out with him too. I admit I was a jerk back then. Now that I've graduated from college, I work and live in a freight company in the suburbs. Only then did I realize how hard it is to make money. But how can I greet him every Christmas? She wouldn't listen. So last night on the balcony, I saw her passing by our apartment building. I really thought she was finally going to talk to me. And forgive me. You know, she and her family live downtown. It's a suburban apartment complex near my company, at least 50 kilometers away. She came all the way out here in the woods at night. It had to be to see her own younger brother. It's impossible, but I was just thinking about it when I saw her walk past my apartment without hesitation, and run down the hill towards the forest. Why? I was filled with it, grabbing a leather jacket, and heading downstairs to find her. Although the suburban area I live in is very quiet, but really, not many people come out at night. It's said that there's something unclean around here. So I wouldn't usually be out this late. I followed her, but she seemed completely unaware of anyone behind her. She just kept walking downhill. Finally, she plunged into a cave on the west side. This is just unbelievable. She went out alone late at night without her children, and without her husband, coming all this way, just to cool off inside the cave. And this cave has never been peaceful. Every time there are so-called hiking enthusiasts who go in, whether it's day or night, when they come out, their expressions always look like they've been through something. It was like something out of a nightmare. Thinking of this, I quickly switched on my phone's flashlight and said, "Messi, it's Dala. What are you doing there?" She ignored me. It was as if she hadn't heard me at all. She bent down and crawled into the depths of the narrow cave. At this moment, I really wanted to leave, because I myself have been diagnosed with a bit of claustrophobia. But when I thought about how my sister had entered the cave without any equipment, almost like she was sleepwalking, how could I possibly just leave her there? So, I gritted my teeth, took a deep breath, and crawled in after her. The entrance of the cave is indeed quite narrow, but after walking in for about 10 meters or so, it finally starts to open up. It could probably fit 2 people side by side. There are no visible tracks, but some large and small remnants can be seen. The structure also resembles an abandoned small mine. The air around is surprisingly damp, so it smelled damp and foul. No one knows why it was abandoned in the first place. I walked straight in, calling out my sister's name, but she still didn't answer. Yet I could clearly hear her footsteps just ahead of me, not far away. But every time I get a little closer, or every time I think my flashlight has illuminated something, thinking it's messy stuff, what I actually see is a variety of strange stone carvings. These stone carvings are stuck one after another on the cave wall. Or rather, they look more like something was shoved into the cave wall. If Messi is this interested, I came here especially to see these stone carvings. That's unbelievably amazing. I muttered to myself and continued walking forward. After passing through a slanted, curving tunnel, I surprisingly arrived at a huge cavern. All around were glittering or stones, a pool of water, and stalactites. And Messi was hiding in a corner by the pool. She was kneeling there with her head lowered, I immediately walked over. I was sure she was having some mental issues, but when I turned her body around, I realized. It wasn't just mental. Her physical condition was definitely wrong too. Her eyes had already sunken in. Her hair was unusually dirty and split. She was still sweating coldly. I don't understand what this symptom is, but I know that if it's a disease, she's definitely seriously ill. Messi, are you okay? I shone my phone's light on her, but she suddenly broke free. She ran deeper into the cave again. She scared me. By the time I regained my composure, I continued following her. So what is it? What is drawing her to desperately push forward? Gradually, I noticed the surrounding rock walls changing again. The stone carvings were gone. There were no more oars either. Instead, it's a vast, sticky, slimy liquid. Wherever the light shines, there are insects, cockroaches, beetles, millipedes, and all kinds of worms. You step on me, I step on you, crawling back and forth, making a dense, clicking sound. I know that in some pristine caves, there are indeed quite a few insects, but this dense crowd of them is truly beyond my expectations. At this moment, a strange swallowing sound came from in front of me. I looked down, and realized that I had been distracted by all the bugs earlier. Now, Messi had already collapsed right in front of me. She was curled up on the ground, occasionally making a swallowing sound. She let various bugs crawl all over her. Without saying a word, I peeled the bugs and slime off her body. I vaguely heard her mumbling something. The bugs had all become bugs. I couldn't understand what she was saying. Move your ear a little closer, and pick her up off the ground. But she's still talking. The bugs have turned into bugs. Yes, there are definitely bugs everywhere. We should leave now. I answered her as if comforting a child. I was just going to carry her out. I wanted her to finally shut up, and she finally calmed down. But I hadn't taken 2 steps, when a wet, heavy thud came from behind me. I just turned my flashlight, when I saw the insects on the rock wall scattering like they were seeking shelter. All of them crawled away. A tentacle, more than 2 meters in diameter. It crawled out from deep inside, crawling towards us. Okay, I cursed. Then I turned and walked away. But because I was walking too quickly, I slipped violently on the slime on the ground. Messi also fell out along with me, but she was still mumbling, and it had all turned into bugs. I know I don't have time to pick her up. I also know she won't feel the pain in this short moment. Dragging her, I moved back the way we came. The crawling sound of that giant worm continued to thud-thud from the darkness. Closer and closer it came, until I felt my arms suddenly yanked by a tremendous force. Messi was instantly dragged away like this. I was first startled. When I turned around to light up the cave, I couldn't see Messi. I couldn't see the worm either. I didn't even see a bug crawling on the rock wall. Everything was quiet, and all I could hear was my own breathing. Could it be that what just happened was a hallucination? Yes, I do have claustrophobia. Maybe I really was hallucinating, but then I heard a very familiar voice, coming from the cave. They had all become insects. My scalp tingled. I decided to go back in and rescue my sister. I could hear her, she was very close. It shouldn't be a problem to pull her out. I slowly walked into the tunnel that was originally full of insects. Messi collapsed next to a puddle. Oh no, rather than a puddle. It would be better to call it a shallow pit filled with worm slime. I held her under the armpits with both hands. I picked her up from the shallow pit, but I discovered that where I should have seen her calf had turned into long, thin tentacles, twisting and curling relentlessly. I immediately dropped her to the ground. When my light shone on her face, a drop of slime dripped from her mouth onto the ground. Wait, that's not Messi at all. There were all kinds of insects crawling, piling up together. They had stitched together into the shape of my sister, standing in front of me. Or should I say, my sister herself. Every part of her body had turned into insects. It was then that I understood. She had been mumbling something just now. At this point, she had already stood up from the shallow pit. It stared directly at me. Knowing that I had fallen into such a trap, I turned and fled without hesitation. I could hear the huge squirming sound coming from behind me. Along with it were the sounds of various flying insects' wings. The sound of insects grinding their teeth. The noise grew louder. The sound was so loud that my ears could barely tolerate it, yet I still insisted on running back. When I finally rested from the frantic gasping, and the overwhelming ringing in my ears, I realized I had already crawled out of the cave. The night in the suburbs was still quiet. The moonlight was still gentle. It made me feel like the scene I just experienced was an illusion. I only remember that after I returned to the apartment last night, I didn't dare to call the police, because I didn't know how to explain it to the police. I just sent an email to my sister. But she still hasn't replied to me until today. Why? Is it because, as usual, she holds a grudge against me and hasn't replied, or has something really happened to her? Did you bully my child? You look quite delicious. I was startled and instantly sprang up from my chair. I found that I was just like usual, sitting in my office, asleep again. Sunlight was already shining in from the window, reflecting on the sign on my desk. It says my name, Linny. My partner Ash knocked on the door, and walked in from outside. Seeing me covering my face, looking distressed, he asked, "Had another nightmare?" I rubbed my eyes and replied, "You already know. Why did I leave home thousands of kilometers away, and come to this big city to do this job? I am a commissioned investigator. You can think of me as a private detective. My childhood was spent in a very strange family forest. Believe me, you wouldn't want to know what exists inside. Since my brother died, I silently vowed to escape from there. After I became an adult, I truly did it. I completely changed my identity, came to New Orleans to work, until today." Suddenly, a burst of engine noise interrupted my wandering thoughts. I pulled down the window and looked out. A very luxurious car just pulled up in front of our office. Listen, the reason I say that is because I really don't know much about cars. Unlike Ash, we got a big case. She got excited immediately. That Phantom was custom-made. I didn't understand what she was saying. Illusions, custom-made things, and whatnot. But then I saw, in the back seat of the car, a middle-aged woman, similarly dressed in fine clothes, walking straight towards our main entrance. Ash and I quickly straightened our clothes, and opened the door to greet her. Her face seemed a little familiar. Although she was dressed in fine clothes, her demeanor lacked any air of superiority. Instead, she was polite and respectful towards us. After she sat down on the sofa in the waiting area, Ash immediately asked, "What can I do for you, Ms. Beaumont?" Beaumont. That's when I realized why her face seemed so familiar. Because anyone who has seen the city news will definitely know that the Beaumont family is the largest in our city. And the person in front of us is undoubtedly the new head of the Beaumont family, Mrs. Mathis. Because not long ago, my mother passed away. The woman spoke my thoughts. "I suppose you all know." Ash and I nodded, signaling her to continue. "But her body has disappeared." The moment she said that, Ash and I were startled. Not only because we didn't know about this, but also because it was so blunt. But the client remained so calm. She took a piece of paper out of her pocket again, and unfolded it for us. This is also a scanned copy of her will. There is a very big problem with it, one that we can't solve. I went over it with Ash. Apart from never having seen so much money, I really didn't find anything strange, until Mathis spoke again. "Look at the first line. It clearly states in black and white that all real estate should be given to the eldest daughter, Margot Beaumont. But my sister is missing." Ash immediately pressed further. "I didn't know you had a sister." She was unhappy with the inheritance distribution. She ran away. She shook her head and said no. Margot disappeared 25 years ago. UIP. We spent the whole morning clearing up the sequence of events. 25 years ago, Beaumont's eldest daughter, Margot, who had always been pampered and spoiled, and, of course, had an eccentric personality, disappeared after running away from home. The only evidence left was an old photo of her from when she was young, and a letter found in her former bedroom. It read, "Leave tonight. Escaping the golden cage." Lex left. So, all these years, the family has always treated Margot as the child who eloped and left, searching for her tirelessly, but never finding any clues. What's even stranger is, Madame Beaumont had always opposed and obstructed the search for her eldest daughter, yet before she passed away, she inexplicably willed a large portion of her estate to her. And the day after she signed the will and breathed her last, her body vanished from her bedroom. I hear you're the best investigator for this kind of bizarre case. Matisse extended his hand to me, so I thought I'd hand both of them over to you. Find my missing mother. Find my missing sister. Is that okay? I was already tempted by Beaumont's huge commission. Then, with her praise like that, I impulsively extended my hand. Leave it to us. Until she left, I started to worry. Finding a missing person. Who's been missing for half a lifetime? I'm really good at making things difficult for myself, but since I've already agreed, Ash and I started planning and dividing the work. Let her go to the Beaumont house to search for the missing body. I'll investigate Margot. After all, as Ash said, Margot and I may both be running away from our past lives, living under assumed identities. I might be better at guessing where she went. After Ash drove away this afternoon, I started to investigate those old cases more intently. The yellowing Polaroid photos. Margot was under 18 when she left. Now we have to rely on these blurry photos from her younger years to search for clues. It's really quite difficult. I tried to find the boys she was close to from dozens of photos. I believe the Beaumont family must have tried this tactic too. It was just stopped by the madam. Thinking about it makes me laugh. Her own daughter, for the boy she loves, left in a panic and in haste. After leaving, she pretended not to care, not searching. But when she passed away, she mentioned her daughter's name in the will. Escaping the golden cage made of gold. Humph, what Alexander said was indeed not wrong. I muttered that to myself. But I suddenly seemed to realize something. Is Alex's full name definitely Alexander? I started looking again at the first Polaroid photo. Suddenly, I felt like the previous 2 hours. I had missed too many details. Sure enough, there was such a woman. Although I had never had any close interaction with Margot. But she and Marg are wearing the same style of ring on their ring fingers. They're wearing identical rings. Their rings never appeared in the same photograph. It's as if they were avoiding being seen together. But ultimately, it didn't escape my investigation. My guess was right. The Alex in the letter is actually a woman's full name. It wasn't Alexander. It was a girl named Alexandra. It's a good thing Margot frequented that bar. It's still in business. That's how I found the membership roster from all those years ago. That Alex from 25 years ago did exist. And after Margot disappeared, she never came back. I followed the trail step by step, and found her current residence. Luckily, she hadn't moved away from New Orleans, driving alone for 2 or 3 hours. I arrived at the neighborhood where she lived. I parked on the lawn in front of her house. As the sun set, a woman wearing an apron. She was holding her pet dog, and seemed to be waiting for someone at the door. I got out of the car, and walked straight toward her. Hello. Excuse me, are you Miss Alexandra Dyson? She froze for a moment after hearing that. Ma'am, I believe I should have spoken to your colleague about this. I don't want to buy supplements. I looked down. I glanced at my formal wear that I hadn't had time to change out of yet, quickly explaining. No, it's not like that. I'm an investigator. I was sent by the Beaumont family. That old woman is still persistent. She suddenly said. I thought for a moment. The old lady. She must be referring to the former Mrs. Beaumont. So I answered her. I think the person you're talking about passed away 2 weeks ago from a stroke. Immediately, it seemed like Alexandra lowered her guard. I took the dog back to its kennel. Then I opened the door and said, come in. Alexandra's house is quite large. And all the tableware, the shoe rack, and other furnishings prove that. She doesn't live alone. Perhaps her hatred for Mrs. Beaumont is considerable, too. From her earlier aversion and perfunctory manner, it has turned into the warm hospitality it is now. We casually ate and drank at the table. After chatting a little, I finally got to the point. Mrs. Dyson, your relationship with Margot Beaumont was once quite special. Is that right? It seems she already knew I would ask this. She answered with a very calm smile. If I say no, would you believe me? Humph, you've already come this far. Finished the last sip of lemonade, she continued. We first met at a bar. From the first moment I saw her, I just felt something was wrong. Later, she told me that her feelings for me were unusual too. We were truly compatible. We had the same interests. We both liked strange and mysterious things, and we completely accepted each other's physical imperfections, as well. That's why we only knew each other for less than 2 months, and we fell in love. Her face was full of happiness. She took out an old photo hidden deep in the bookcase. She handed it to me. It was a photo of them together. Margot was smiling mischievously, hugging Alexandra. Suddenly, her tone turned sharp again. But that old woman. She almost went to great lengths to stop the two of us. That madwoman. Is she gone? Humph, she really had it coming. I see you're cursing her so fiercely. I'm already starting to wonder. What happened between her and Mrs. Beaumont? To comfort her, I quickly said again, but she didn't stop you two from eloping, did she? She sneered and said, that was a vow she made herself. She said that if we had the ability to run away on our own, she wouldn't tell anyone, and she wouldn't come after us. Not even if we died. No wonder, that might be why. The wife has been preventing her family from finding Margot. With the truth laid bare before my eyes, I asked the final question. Ms. Dyson, the Beaumonts are now facing some inheritance disputes. Considering it's a matter from so many years ago, could you please ask Margot to come out? I haven't finished speaking. Suddenly, a burst of children's playfulness came from the front door. Then I saw a middle-aged man, carrying a child walking in. Lex, we have guests at home. My head immediately buzzed with a loud sound, but I saw Alexandra give a strange smile. What's going on? Detective. She said you seem to have missed something. Margot didn't leave with me that night at all. I returned to the car, staring at the photo Alexandra lent me. So she didn't elope. Then what reason would she have to leave the Beaumont family? I immediately called Ash. While asking about the progress on her end, I sought her help. To my surprise, she sounded drunk as soon as she spoke. What's going on? Rini? Have you found Maria? I was immediately furious and said, what's going on with you? I'm working over here. You even got a drink. And you couldn't even remember the missing person's name correctly. Her name is Margot. Do you know that? On the other end of the line, there's still no sign of self-reflection. They just said, oh, that wasn't me. When we arrived at the old lady's mansion at noon today, the housekeeper said there are many areas under renovation, and wouldn't let me in. She said she would take me to the winery to investigate first. Investigate? Is this what it turned into? I slapped my head a few times in frustration. I regretted not letting her investigate Margot instead. I had no choice but to push the conversation forward and said, listen to me now. Margot really has a partner, who Mrs. Beaumont strongly opposed her being with. Impressive. You managed to figure that out. Ash responded to me in a dazed way. Let me continue. But they didn't run away together. Do you understand? I don't get it anymore. So where else could Margaret go? No response from the other side. Aish? I asked again. All I could hear was the sound of something being dragged, the noise of empty air. Then came the sound of someone seemingly raising their phone. Aish, give me some advice here. Where do you think she would escape to? But just then, a woman's voice, one I'd never heard before, came from the other end of the phone. Where did you run off to? Can I not have ever left? I was startled by the sudden voice. They hung up. That definitely wasn't Ash's voice. Nor was it Ms. Matisse's. Who was it? I floored the gas pedal and headed back. I kept calling Ash repeatedly during the drive. But for more than an hour, no one answered the phone. A strange premonition began to grow in my heart. But the person was right. When you encounter something you once hated, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll choose to run away like I did. You could also take the risk and face it head-on. Just like my older sister Fiona. After we went through such a childhood together, she still chose to stay in the woods where we grew up. But I don't think this bold confrontation is courage. Sometimes it's more of an incomprehensible madness. We arrived at the Madam's Manor near midnight. Surprisingly, my car had barely approached the gate, when the intercom at the security booth blared. Miss Aish said this is her partner. Let her drive in. The gate was immediately opened for me. I drove straight into this vast estate. I heard that before the lady passed away, she lived here with 2 doctors, a butler, and a few servants in such a large place. Nothing important. She wouldn't even see her child. Wouldn't she be bored? I slowly stopped in front of the huge granite mansion. Stopped. Surprisingly, Ash was standing there unscathed, waiting for me. And Mrs. Matisse was standing beside her. The servant helped me out of the car. I quickly rushed up to Ash. I grabbed her. "You. What happened earlier?" She answered nonchalantly. What happened?" "I fell asleep. I just fell asleep." "How many hours did you sleep?" "I'm still angry. Why didn't you answer my call?" "I don't know if it's an act." She lowered her head. She took out her phone and asked, "Did you call me?" "I don't know." At this moment, Mattis slowly walked over. "Could we please move the investigation forward, both of you? Didn't you all tell me to come whenever I had the time?" I looked completely confused. Aish raised her hand and said, "It was me who called you. After the housekeeper pulled me out at noon, I started looking for you. She said the house is being renovated. She wouldn't let me in. If the head of the house doesn't come, she didn't agree." Matisse frowned. After all these years, he still doesn't understand the rules. Where is she? Ash looked around. "You mean Miss Megan?" "I haven't seen her since I woke up at the winery." "Hey, how about we just forget about it? Let's go inside." Matisse and I didn't argue anymore. We walked into the grand foyer of the mansion. To my surprise, the interior decoration was very simple. It was completely different from what I had imagined, with all the ornaments. Maybe it's because it's still under renovation. Thinking about this, I walked and asked Mrs. Matisse, "What exactly was my mother renovating before she passed away?" "I don't know either. My mother used to live here with my sister. But since my sister disappeared, she became very erratic. She started repeatedly hiring group after group of people to renovate the building. Each batch cannot exceed 1 month. It's as if they're intentionally kept in the dark about what the overall design of the renovation will be." Suddenly, the motion sensor lights in the mansion turn on, and a huge photo of an elderly person appears on the wall in front of them. This is a photo of Mrs. Beaumont, wearing sunglasses, wearing a veil, just like the news photos we usually see in the city news. That's another way she became strange. After my sister disappeared, she started covering her face with all sorts of things. To be honest, until she passed away, none of us kids have really seen her face. At first, she said she was afraid we would see her swollen face from crying, but the veil and sunglasses have been on for over 20 years now. Aish clearly wasn't interested in any of this. She went straight to the renovation area. I, on the other hand, squinted my eyes and studied that photo. It's indeed strange. It's not just what Matisse said that's strange. What's even stranger is, I can vaguely see that behind Mrs. Beaumont's veil, she's not wearing a sorrowful expression. She's smiling. And this smile, I feel like I've seen it somewhere before. Where is the ladies' room? Aish asked a question. Then, Mattis led us upstairs to the second floor. If the hall and corridor on the first floor were just minor repairs, the bedroom area on the second floor had been almost completely renovated. Almost every wall was missing plaster. I was really curious about how these servants could have the patience. I've lived with this strange old lady for so many years. I started to slowly check for any signs in the room with Ash. Walls, floors, furniture. We knocked and tapped our way through, until we moved the heavy bed, and knocked on the old wall behind it, which had never been touched. The echo was clearly unusual. The wall behind must be hollow. Both Matisse and I were startled. After all, no one expected that. The real problem wasn't where the renovations were done, but rather where they hadn't been done. The old wallpaper was worn enough that when Ash and I pulled, it tore right off. I pried apart the rotten, decaying pieces of wood. Behind them, a smoky little path surprisingly appeared. "What's going on?" Ms. Matisse nearly dropped her jaw in shock. She stumbled back several steps. I pulled out the flashlight I always keep in my pocket, and shone it inside. The moment the light came on, I actually saw a flesh-colored humanoid figure. He bent over and darted past. Matisse jumped again. Turning around, he said to her, "I guess there might be someone else who has been living here with your mother. I'll lead the way." Holding the flashlight, Mattis was sandwiched in the middle. Aish was bringing up the rear. The three of us slowly ventured into the secret passage like this. I never expected this tunnel to be so long, and the further we went, the more we saw plates, bedding, and tattered clothes. but they undoubtedly emitted a disgusting stench. Suddenly, there was a rapid sound of footsteps. It came from a side passage to my left. It sounded like a barefoot person running quickly. I quickly turned the flashlight's direction. I found more side passages, and on the ground of one of the paths, there was actually a vague, dry human figure. "Miss Linney. Is that a corpse up ahead?" I didn't respond to Mattis' words. I carefully walked forward. What I saw wasn't so much a corpse as a piece of human skin. The skin, still attached to hair, lay on the ground as if deflated. When I saw the human skin face, I immediately took a sharp breath. It was Mrs. Burnt's face. Mary screamed hoarsely. It seemed to frighten the thing that had just run by. That thing let out a scream too, and from the sound, it seemed, she is not far from our right. I quickly turned the flashlight over, but in the darkness, I felt a force. It grabbed my hand. The flashlight beam also hit the ceiling. Then, that thing pressed close to me. It trembled and said, "Please. Please. I mean no harm. I just want to survive." At first, I was surprised. Then, I was confused. Slowly, I lowered the flashlight. I asked, "Who are you?" "I'm Megan. I've been locked here by the old lady. I don't even know how I ended up locked in here." Mattis suddenly seemed curious. He leaned in and asked Megan, "What are you talking about? Are you the housekeeper, Megan? You've been locked up. I can feel it." In the darkness, she seemed to nod. But as I gradually pulled away from the flashlight, and my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I began to see what kind of person was before me. It was a person without skin or hair, blood red in color, with viscous fluid dripping all over. The muscle textures were completely exposed in the air. It was also covered in swirling black totems I'd never seen before, curving black totems. If this was a person, I can't imagine how she lived to this day. Her mouth, devoid of lips, showing only teeth, was about to speak. But Ash suddenly rushed forward. She must have also seen what was in front of her. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it on her. How could you possibly be Megan? Megan was just with me at the winery, but when the bright light hit her, she screamed and started backing away into the darkness. It seemed too late. The black tattoo on her body began to glow. Finally, it burst into flames. It burned right in front of me, alive, until it turned into a pile of dry wood. I finally understood why she was so afraid of the flashlight. I also understood why she could only hide here. She dared not leave. While the fire hadn't spread yet, I quickly helped protect Matisse and led her out. For a moment, the bedroom turned into a sea of flames. When the security arrived with firefighting equipment, the entire second floor, with all its years of renovation, could be said to have been completely destroyed by the flames. Aish looked at the fire, tilted his head, smiled, and said, "This must be the trouble of having such a large estate. Let's go." "The case is closed." I said, "It's closed. How did you figure that out?" "Isn't it obvious?" She hummed again. Clearly, Lady Beaumont knows something. Something dark and sinister. The eldest daughter, who had originally planned to elope, turned into a monster, locked away in the darkness for years. Margaret has been driven to madness. She can't even tell who she is. And she claims to be Megan. That's probably because she's not mentally stable. That's why she secretly snuck in after her mother died, and dragged the old lady's body into the secret passage. I answered, dumbfounded. That's a far-fetched deduction. By your logic, the Beaumont family practices witchcraft. They turn people into monsters and corpses. You're right. After finishing the fire safety arrangements, Matisse suddenly walked over. Our house does indeed have a mysterious library. To be precise, it has long been Margot's library. It's our generation now, only she still likes to watch this kind of thing. I think it might be related to our mother, who always talks about strange things. We've been influenced by her. Our ancestors were like this too. She then pointed to the third floor of the mansion. If you want to investigate this, you can go anytime. No need, Ash, she interrupted abruptly. We're close to the truth. We'll summarize the results soon, and report them to you. Just wait, she snorted again. She patted my shoulder, signaling me to drive back. But I still can't understand or accept this outcome. I always felt that Ash seemed to be obsessed with money. She's completely different from the woman she used to be, and there are so many things we don't know about her. We haven't uncovered them. I wasn't reconciled. I returned to the manor again. I told Ash to wait for me in the wine cellar. I'll be right back. The fire has been extinguished. The renovation equipment in the mansion has also been completely removed. Its magnificent original appearance has been revealed again. As soon as I entered, I had the male butler take me to Margot's library. I firmly believe there are many clues hidden there. But it's strange. Wasn't her butler a woman? Where did Aunt Megan go? I didn't worry about it. I started searching through the towering bookshelves. There were indeed many. Books on witchcraft and voodoo from all over the world. Insect-based witchcraft from the East. And European witchcraft. The Indian friendship spell. And some I'd never even seen before. What's even more shocking is, almost every book Margot had left a bookmark in. It shows just how obsessed she was with these things. Suddenly, a book made from animal hide caught my attention. The hide is very thick. The fur hasn't been cleaned very thoroughly. It seems like something made by local inhabitants from a cold region, using local materials. It's casually crafted, and on the page marked by the bookmark, there are a few words written clearly. Ijilak. Perhaps it was intuition. I began to read page by page, turning the pages of this almost magical record. Ijikarak endures beneath the nest of the dead. He can be a human body, or an ethereal presence. We believers already understand how to bestow the right. Those upon whom it is bestowed strip others of flesh and bone. Criticizing others' superficiality can be freely distorted, like Eerie, existing forever. A drop of my sweat fell on the book. Nervously, I continued to turn the pages. Those who have lost their skin and fur, with the Eerie curse upon them, will never see the sunlight again. Trapped in darkness all day long, worshipped as the servants of us believers. I suddenly slammed the book shut, wiping the cold sweat off my face. The things written in this cursed book were too insane. But it seemed to perfectly explain everything we saw 2 nights ago, during the night. The strange person trapped in the secret passage, the human skin shed on the floor, the thing that spontaneously combusts when exposed to bright light. Suddenly, an extremely bizarre idea flashed through my mind. What if the culprit behind all this wasn't the old lady, but Margot herself? Just like the voice I heard that day, Margaret never left. It was this follower of Eerie, or whatever, who lived on under a different identity. We share the same interests. We both enjoy strange and mysterious things, and we're completely accepting of each other's flaws. In our bodies, too. Can't I have never left? I am Megan. I was locked in here by the old lady. I immediately understood the whole situation. I ran downstairs, found Ash, and pulled her into the car. I stepped on the gas. I headed towards Mrs. Matisse's company. Ash, sitting in the passenger seat, was clearly startled by my actions. What are you doing in such a hurry? I explained to her while driving. Ash, I've already figured it out. Margot Beaumont is not like me. Maybe we both have some childhood trauma, but I chose to run away. She chose to become those shadows. Do you understand? Ash answered me helplessly. I did get a little incoherent just now. I'm rephrasing. Some people are different from us. They may be born purely evil. They have an unfillable obsession with witchcraft and sorcery. Margot is who I found in her library. They found a strange technique used by some cultists. It can peel off human skin, and wear it like a mask. Do you remember the old woman's skin we saw in the secret passage? She was the first victim. Margaret never left. She first experimented on her own mother. She succeeded. She replaced her mother. It's been 25 years since then. As the head of Beaumont, she has been in charge of this massive business empire, a full 25 years. Otherwise, why would Mattis and the others always be obstructed by their own mother? Go find Margot. Because Margot is right before their eyes. Ash clearly looked a little stunned. I continued. The second victim was Megan. I don't know how many years she served. That fake old woman at the Beaumont house. But she certainly didn't escape Margot's clutches. Margaret went after her once the old lady shed her skin. Of course, in her eyes, it was the lady who did it. That's why she kept insisting it was the lady in front of me. She locked her up. Right. Yes. The person we saw in the secret passage wasn't anyone else. It was Megan. Megan, who had been skinned and turned into a monster. And the butler who stopped you from entering the mansion is actually Margot, who has changed her skin again. Did you know? At that moment, it suddenly started to rain. I had to slow down the car. Then I suddenly heard Ash laugh and say, "Linny, you're quite good at guessing. But how did you deduce which one was the victim?" Through her smile. My answer clearly startled Ash. I continued to explain, it was actually a kind of illness. I gave her all of Margot's old Polaroid photos. All of them. Saying I'd always thought there was something odd about Margot's smile in those photos. She wasn't just glum-faced during the group photo. Even when everyone was playing around, she'd make this strange, lopsided smile. That wasn't a smile. Actually, it's a kind of muscle spasm. When she's nervous, she'll have this spasm. It just looks like a lopsided smile. Only she and the Beaumont family has this illness. After her family mistakenly believed she was missing, the lady put on a veil. Why? Was it just because she was afraid of people seeing her cry? Not at all. It's because that was Margot, wearing the old lady's skin. Beneath the veil, she still has symptoms of cramps. She kept smirking to herself. Aish stopped speaking. I didn't glance at her either. I kept looking seriously at the rainy road ahead. Aish, if you think back carefully, wasn't the Megan you met, the housekeeper, someone who also occasionally, a wicked grin appeared on his face, as if, like this? I heard that sound and jumped in surprise. I turned my head to look at the passenger seat. At that moment, Aisha's mouth was twitching while lifting up, as if he was smiling with pride. City News Update, January 10, 2024, 2:27 p.m. A sudden traffic accident occurred on North City Route 3. A white SUV plunged directly off the cliff. Miss Ashmont Center, sitting in the passenger seat, miraculously survived. The car's owner, Rini, disappeared mysteriously. She is still being searched for. There have been sudden heavy rains in the suburbs recently. We advise all drivers to be cautious and drive safely. Drive carefully. If you're scrolling through your phone and see a game called Can You Hide? Remember, absolutely do not open it. You might not be able to intentionally find it in app stores or on public websites, but if it inexplicably suddenly pops up on your phone, remember to do exactly as I say. That weekend, my phone popped up a window like this. Out of caution, I initially didn't choose any option. What if it's yes or no? What if I click and end up with a virus? So I threw my phone aside and opened my computer to search for help. But all the results I found seemed to be evasive. None of them directly say what it is, until a Reddit user invited me to a Discord community discussing mysticism. He told me that I would find my answer there. And indeed, there's a lot of information about this game here. It seems like a random drop, a new gadget for smartphones in any part of the world. If you click on it, it's like starting a mysterious game of hide and seek. But the further you look into the chat history of this community, the stranger the game of hide and seek becomes. User 1, can someone help me? My friend has been playing this game non-stop for a week. Then he disappeared. That was 2 weeks ago. Although people are searching every day now, but my gut tells me, I won't find him. The last message he sent me was a voice note. He said this wasn't a real game. Now, after seeing a face outside the window, he hasn't been heard from since. User 2, did he choose no? User 3, I was pretty smart. As soon as I saw that pop-up, I immediately threw my phone away. Anyway, nothing has happened to me so far. User 4, I chose no. But after that, I kept hearing chattering sounds nearby. I don't know if this has anything to do with me. User 6, guys, just keep the pop-up window open. Don't select anything. User 5, how can that be? Isn't that like throwing my phone away directly? User 3, exactly, that's what it means. Throwing the phone away. Trust me, I've tried it, it works. User 6, what if he appears again on your next device? User 5, would it be enough to just turn it off? User 5, that shouldn't have any bad consequences, right? User 3, the consequence. User 3, the consequence is probably your funeral. User 3, I can't read anymore. User 3, the further I read, the more anxious I get. User 3, originally, I thought this pop-up was just a phone virus. But, what people online are saying sounds like a ghost story. I could only leave my phone on the table, telling myself it's okay. It's okay. The person's disappearance has nothing to do with this thing, alright? But the more I tried to stop myself from thinking about it, I couldn't help myself in the end. I just turned off my phone, restarted it, and chose to format it. Luckily, everything was fine. At least, everything was fine that weekend. Monday afternoon, just like every week, my colleague Cretania and I, the two of us, went to the park behind the company for a lunch break. I was about to share my experience with them when Crit spoke up first. Why didn't you reply all weekend? Didn't we agree to decide on a location in the group chat on Saturday, and go cycling on Sunday? I didn't answer directly. I don't really like riding bikes. So I just followed what the manager told me. I might as well work from home. Just make something instead. Tanya interrupted and said, are you sure? But as your partner, I haven't been assigned any projects either. You wouldn't be like Chris, would you? Spending the whole weekend playing games. His words seemed to directly spark Clee's interest. Clee rushed in, wide-eyed, and said, hey, speaking of this, I'm really addicted. Lee, have you played it? Can you even hide from it? A heavy feeling settled in my heart. Tanya continued explaining, I really can't believe it. You've been playing this since last Tuesday. What kind of magic does it have? I'll continue listening to what Chris says. It's really fun. At first, it was just a pop-up, popping up in my phone's browser. Tanya thought it was a virus. But let me tell you, Lee, I guarantee this is an AR game. He didn't give me a chance to explain what I had experienced. I had already climbed up from the grass. I set my phone on a picnic table. I opened the game. That was also the first time I saw the interface of that game. That was a real-time map of the park we were in. Carly's location was marked with a green dot. And besides that, there was a red dot slowly moving around nearby. And it was getting closer to her. Watch closely. This game forces a match every day from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. It will start automatically. I have to hide for the next 2 hours. I didn't want to come to the park at this time. It's okay to eat later. But I'm confident. I won't be found here. It's already 3:30. I'm practically going to win again today. I asked in a trembling voice. But what was that red dot tracking you? Krill whispered mysteriously. It's a demon, huh? He chuckled. Tanya slapped him hard. You're being scary, okay? You don't even know anything yet. You're scaring him like that. The atmosphere relaxed again. They chatted and laughed. They devoured sandwiches while discussing the game. I alone was uninterested. I kept my eyes glued to Carrie's phone screen. That red dot was circling our park. But it was getting closer to our location. I don't know how long I had been staring at it. The red dot suddenly disappeared. And then it flashed back in the park. Cree was wrong. The demon he spoke of was about to find him. I broke into a cold sweat in an instant. I quickly got up to call out to Cree, but he beat me to it and grabbed his phone. Humph, I won again at 4 o'clock. He's not wrong. It's 4 o'clock, the game is over. Maybe I was just worrying for nothing. He muttered. He pointed the phone's camera at the red dot. But this time, it's so close. It's only 100 meters away. It feels like the difficulty is getting higher, doesn't it? On his phone screen, it does seem like an AR game is being displayed. A string of characters appears on the park lawn, where the red dot is located. Cleo continued fiddling with the phone like a child. Tanya and I also let out a sigh of relief. Maybe I was really scared by what the Discord user said. It's just a game. It doesn't really matter. What was that sound? I suddenly got a chill. I looked up and scanned the park. Tanya and Cree, who were clearly still chatting, hadn't noticed the noise at all. But my intuition told me, this noise is unusual. I don't think it's anyone nearby. Any tree, any animal, or anything like a bench, that would make that sound. I think I've located the source. And it's right behind me. It was around 4 o'clock just now, where the red dot last stopped. On that lush green grass, a dead tree had appeared out of nowhere. And behind the tree, there seemed to be a little child, a bit over a meter tall. The child was peeking at the three of us. The child was also wearing a flesh-colored mask on their face. The child turned their head and disappeared behind the tree. Lee, what are you looking at? Tanya suddenly leaned in. It almost scared the life out of me. I swallowed a big gulp of saliva and said, Cree, can you quit or log out of that game? I really think there's something there. I feel like something's trying to get to you. Please, don't play anymore. But he didn't care at all. He sighed and said, Lee. Your paranoid nature. Ever since I met you, I've often found it really frustrating. Do you really think there are demons in this world? I finally couldn't hold back, and told them everything I had seen and heard. But all I got in return was their disbelief. Tanya even thought that something was wrong with my mind. She told me to rest more these past couple of days. Monday night, Tuesday during the day, they kept sending me text messages. They repeatedly comforted me, telling me everything was fine. Everything was normal on their end, too. The anxiety I had been carrying gradually eased. I started to believe that I just had a minor issue with my mental health. But the facts told me it wasn't like that at all. Around 6:30 p.m., just as I was driving back, Tanya suddenly called me. The phone was connected to Bluetooth at that time. Her voice came straight out of the car speakers. She was crying. Lee, you have to save me. The game has started again. Right in our house. He started again. Wait, don't panic yet. I leaned closer to the car's dashboard. What are you trying to say? Are you talking about that game of hide and seek? Yes, but today, it seems like something special happened. It got delayed and didn't start until 6 o'clock. Now we're stuck in the house. I suspect something's outside the house, looking for us. I saw it through the window. We're hiding in the attic now. That sound is right outside. Can you hear it? Easy. I cut her off. Actually, I was quite nervous myself. Didn't you two call the police? I called the police. They said they'd be here in about 15 minutes. What? I'm calling Lee. Okay. Lee Kelly told me to hang up. He said I should stay quiet. Got it. Don't hang up. K, I responded with a sentence. Tanya, as expected, didn't say anything more. I could still hear Tanya sobbing, Carrie's gasping, and that noise. I decided to turn the car around, heading straight to their place. It'll take at least 8 minutes, but being a little faster than the police is better than nothing. However, the journey was less than halfway. A voice came through the phone again. How did he get in? We didn't even open the door. That was Tanya's voice. Then, there was a quiet reply from Chris. It was probably just a kid. It's okay. Hey, little one, you. Tanya starts screaming. Then, Cree starts howling. Please, don't. The screams of the two friends explode from the car speakers, deafening. After the chaotic static sound, only silence remained on the other end of the phone. No, the sound was still there. I forgot when I arrived at their house. When I burst through the door and rushed to the attic, I had imagined any number of scenes, like a bloody scene of them being brutally murdered, for example. But when I climbed up, all I found was an empty room. A few minutes later, the police arrived. It was just too late for all of us. But looking back now, even if we had arrived earlier, what could we have changed? After questioning me all night, the police let me go, because I have a solid alibi. When they called the police, I was still at the office. When the incident happened, the dash cam and traffic surveillance both prove I was on the road. The two went missing from their own attic. This is the final conclusion the police gave me. I left the police station in tears. I got back to the car. I didn't understand what this game was trying to pull, but I was sure that just formatting the phone wouldn't work at all. I tried to recall, and I seemed to remember more of the scene. It was just when the police and I were searching for them. I saw it outside the window, next to the mailbox. In the corner of the bedroom, there was always a face that seemed to be observing all of us. It flashed by. That face was always wearing a flesh-colored mask. Oh hi, suddenly that pop-up appeared again. This time it was on my car's dashboard. Can you hide from it? I instinctively got scared. I cursed. The car's AI feature was like an artificial idiot. Its voice recognition was meant to refuse, but clearly, the system accepted my answer. You chose no. Let's start with something easier. Up to now, I haven't started a game yet like Carrie has. That's why I haven't disappeared. And that's why you can see this post I made. But every day my phone tells me, the sound of them is coming. And they're getting closer. I just realized. The options in the pop-up window. Yes or no doesn't mean to hide or not hide. It means to accept the challenge or surrender immediately. REA. Walmart announcement. Suddenly, a male voice broadcasted this. I was holding the Lego I had just picked out for my child, lost in thought. I turned to my husband and asked Dan. Isn't the checkout at the front? It was 8:50 p.m. at the time. There were only 10 minutes left before the supermarket closed. If it weren't for the two kids constantly arguing at home, saying they wanted to buy building blocks, Daniel and I wouldn't have picked such a strange time to go shopping. But the truly strange things were just beginning. After hearing that, I looked around the room again. It turned out we weren't the only ones confused. The elderly lady taking a walk, the woman with black hair staring blankly at the gardening tools. They were all gazing blankly at the ceiling. And it was at this moment that a middle-aged man pushing a cart, full of bottled water and canned food, walked straight towards us. Didn't you hear the broadcast? If you don't take cover, the tornado will hit you right in the face. Tornado. I immediately turned to look out the window. The heavy rain continues in the dark night. It was only then that I remembered. A few days ago, I did see a news report about a hurricane making landfall on Sorville from the sea. After this broadcast ends, everyone saw the rolling dark clouds and the raging winds outside. In the next moment, chaos erupted all around. Everyone was pushing their carts and running. They were all heading towards the corner at the back of the supermarket. I still refused to believe that this disaster had suddenly fallen upon us. But instinctively, I picked up Tucker. Daniel also brought Jackson, our family of 4. We rushed toward the electronics section, which wasn't crowded yet. Following their example, we also squeezed into a corner. But when we saw the sample TV mounted right above us, my heart almost leapt into my throat. Daniel, we won't get crushed, right? Daniel reached out. Check if the TV stand is stable. He told me again I shouldn't worry. This kind of indoor wind has happened before. It's no big deal. As a native, he showed incredible calmness. But I only moved here from New York 6 months ago. I still can't relax when encountering this situation. Perhaps he saw my fear. He reached out and embraced the 3 of us. And the overhead broadcast sounded again. I immediately exchanged a glance with Daniel. I believed he had the same concerns as I did. What does this have to do with the tornado? But I still paid attention to the broadcast. I looked up at the surveillance camera hanging from the ceiling. I said, Dan, I don't think they will harm us, right? Should we listen to them? Should we listen to their advice? Hide. My husband nodded. We silently took the child and quickly ran to the central aisle. Who would have thought that in less than half a minute, the supermarket had completely changed. Shopping carts abandoned by fleeing customers were scattered everywhere. The ground was also covered with. There are also items that haven't been paid for yet. The lights are bright, but there's not a trace of life. We crouched next to some Easter bunny sculptures. We used these obstacles to block the camera's line of sight. Then Jackson suddenly spoke up and said, Mom, I'm hungry, shoo. I immediately signaled for him to be quiet. I quickly pulled out a chocolate egg from the snack cabinet and gave it to him. Jack, you eat a little first. But try not to make any noise, okay? I almost let all the complaints in my heart slip out. It was instinctive. I just snatched the chocolate I had just handed to Jackson back. Sorry about that. After hearing this, Daniel stood up. This is definitely a problem. We have to run quickly. I looked up at him questioningly. But this isn't a tornado shelter. Definitely not. He interrupted me. Didn't you hear the wind? Only then did I realize. Although just a few minutes ago, I saw the storm raging outside the window. But now everything around us is completely silent. Not a single gust of wind. All the objects in the room are perfectly still. No shaking at all. Out of caution, I tugged at my husband's collar and said, "Dan, don't take matters into your own hands. Maybe the wind hasn't arrived yet. Maybe it hasn't arrived yet. But I think what they said on the radio is completely unreasonable. We have to go out now." I looked in the direction Daniel was looking. "The supermarket door is right there. Take the 2 children. Let's rush over there. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes to do this." This time, I just couldn't hold back anymore. I picked up Tucker and said, "Let's go." Dan could tell. He had been holding on for a long time. He immediately took a step forward, heading towards our family, and ran full speed towards the glass door. He was absolutely right in his guess. When we reached the glass door, only then did he clearly see that there was not even a breeze outside. There was just a row of streetlights, and a withered tree. The surrounding area was eerily silent, but what he hadn't expected was that the supermarket doors were all jammed. They wouldn't open at all. No, this can't be. Daniel tried various methods, banging, pushing, pulling, even trying to force the door open by sticking his fingers into the gap, but all in vain. I was holding Tucker, who was still sucking on his bottle, while keeping Jackson, who was curled up behind me, company. We were all on edge. Do they want to lock us all in here? I should have kept my mouth shut. I knew I said the wrong thing. Jackson immediately started crying, sobbing that he wanted to go home. Daniel noticed our change in mood, and immediately gave up, proceeding to open the door. "He'll have to comfort us later." But it seemed like he saw something behind us. His gaze went straight past me and the child. I also turned to look. It was a supermarket employee. He was sitting on the floor next to the cashier. His back was to us. On his vest, there was the familiar Walmart Golden Star logo. Daniel over there nearly exploded with anger, shouting out, "What do you want to do? Are you trying to rob us? Let us out right now." The person still sat there with his head down. He didn't say a word, but I could tell. There was a bit of wetness coming from that direction. The sound of smacking. We stared at him, but he seemed completely unaware, eating something. Suddenly, the loudspeaker above us crackled again. My heart sank. I gripped tightly. Daniel, who wanted to charge forward and question him. That man also suddenly stopped. He made a strange noise. Slowly, he stood up. He leaned on the counter. There were several bloody handprints on it. In that moment, I felt my legs completely freeze. Then Daniel decisively grabbed my and Jackson's arms. We ran in the other direction. We plunged into the clothing section. I could hear, besides our footsteps, the repeated thudding sounds behind us. But this time, I absolutely dared not look back at that employee. Here. Daniel suddenly stopped, whispering. And Jackson and I followed. He was pointing at a changing room. The changing room wasn't big, but it was just enough to fit 2 adults and 2 children. It was a tight squeeze. Daniel managed to squeeze in last. After locking the door, Jackson started to whimper again. I immediately interrupted and told him to be quiet. "Jack, Mommy and Daddy will protect you, okay?" When Daniel saw that the situation had stabilized, he took out his phone. He said, "I don't care what tricks these people are trying to pull. I really don't believe in this nonsense. I'm calling the police right now." But his voice gradually shifted from firmness and anger to confusion. "Why is there no signal? Is it because we're crammed in this tiny changing room?" I understand what he's implying. He started to move and was going to unlock the door. But I grabbed him. "Daniel, don't move. Listen carefully. Everyone cover your mouth and nose. Be quieter. Breathe. Something's coming." I bent down. I peered out through the crack under the changing room door. They were a man's feet, wearing black shoes. They were walking step by step, deeper into the changing room. As luck would have it, it was Tucker I was holding. I couldn't help but react to the extremely quiet and strange atmosphere. I cried out. It was just a soft little cry, like a baby's. His feet turned instantly towards our changing room. Then I saw his knees through the crack in the door. He knelt down. Then I saw his 2 hands touch the ground. Yes, he found us without a doubt. And we had nowhere to escape. Then, through the crack in the door, appeared the blue supermarket employee vest. Then, his face. In that instant, Daniel and I's gazes completely collided with the face outside the door. That person outside. I should say, that thing outside. He was laughing, grinning for no reason. You could practically see every single tooth. His skin was white, almost blue. But his eyes were completely milky white. Daniel gasped. I immediately stepped back. I stood up. Opened my mouth to scream. Is something else coming? I thought I was about to collapse. REA. REA. WH. What? I was stunned. Daniel was also stunned. Jackson was still curled up in the corner of the changing room, trembling. Meanwhile, Tucker couldn't hold back his loud sobs. More than all this, what felt more unnatural to me was the sound from outside the door. Everything is normal. The mall's music, the dragging sound of shopping carts, the voices of shoppers. It was eerily silent outside just moments ago. Now it has come back to life. We skeptically opened the door and walked out of the clothing area, but we saw no more strange sights. A line had formed at the checkout. Everyone was calmly and orderly paying. As we walked out of the supermarket, no longer locked down, we ran into the middle-aged man again who had warned us about the approaching tornado. Excuse me, sir. I seized the opportunity to ask, what just happened? What was all that about? He shrugged and replied, I guess the tornado got lost. Hey, we're really lucky, huh? The middle-aged man left a smile and turned away into the darkness. Hello, everyone online. My name is Alea. I'm 33 years old. You can call me Leah. Last year, due to some unforeseen circumstances, I was diagnosed with a mental health issue. I underwent 8 sessions of therapy in total. My doctor suggested that I publicly discuss my experience of mental trauma, that I share it. He said it was important for my recovery. I felt it would be too awkward to tell my family and friends. Anyway, the doctor never emphasized who I should share this with, so I'll just tell everyone online. Alright, I'll start now. What I want to say is, one summer vacation more than 20 years ago, that summer, I had no face. Did you not understand what I just said? It's okay, it's okay. I will explain it slowly. In 2001, I was only 11 years old. It was a rare holiday. I lost track of time playing with my best friend, Imani. We were at her house. By the time we finished watching The Emperor's New Groove, there was not a single ray of sunlight left outside. Originally, my mom and I had made plans. I'll go home after dinner. Now it seems, forget dinner. I guess it's almost bedtime. I quickly said goodbye to Imani and hurried home. From their neighborhood to my own place. The fastest route. It's along the stone path next to Frog Lake. It's probably because it's near the water, and there are no streetlights. So my family has always strictly forbidden me from taking that path home. However, to avoid worrying my parents, I have to take this shortcut home quickly tonight. At least, that was my initial intention. When I was halfway through Frog Lake Park, I felt like I was racing a horse, panting heavily. Plus, my hair was all over the place. It kept poking my nose, obstructing my vision. But how dare I stop? When I was a child, the adults always said, if you stay too long at Frog Lake, there would be frog people crawling out to drag me into the lake, forcing me to drink water with tadpoles in it. At least at the age of 11, I truly believed it without a doubt. But I still slowed my pace, because I heard a cry. It wasn't the horse kind of wailing, but a soft, gentle sobbing. I didn't stop walking, but my eyes couldn't help glancing around. Finally, my gaze settled on a bench. It's strange, really. That bench was right under the only streetlight that was on. There was a girl, about my age, curled up there in a bright blue summer dress. She had her face buried in her knees and was crying, even though Mom told me to go home early. But I was always taught to keep a warm heart. So I decided to change direction. I walked over and sat down next to the girl. She ignored me. She kept sobbing. I had no choice but to speak first and say, "Hi, I'm Leah. Are you okay?" She still didn't lift her head, but she answered, her voice cracking, "They're so mean. I hate them so much." I quickly asked, Who hurt you?" She held out her hand, saying, "They put this bracelet on me. I can't take it off. They said it's for bad girls only." I used the light to get a clear look at the bracelet. It was a copper bracelet. It was engraved with the shape of square iron rings. In the center of each square, there was a carving of a white human figure. The side of the bracelet was surprisingly sharp, If I forced it off, it would definitely cut her hand. But this won't be a problem for me. Let me see, I politely asked. And moved her hand. I then bit the bracelet. Such a sharp tooth, of course it wasn't thick. A notch. And like that, I chipped it out with my teeth. Her hand was thus freed. Naturally, my mouth was unfortunate enough to get a small cut, but it's okay. She finally stopped crying. She wiped her nose and said thank you. Leah, I've been waiting all day. Finally, someone is willing to help me. She just thanked me, and when she turned her head at that moment, I saw her face clearly. To be precise, it was my face. There's no mistake. Her features were exactly the same as mine. I hadn't even figured out what was going on yet. She just smiled, thanked me, and ran off into the woods, leaving me alone, sitting under the streetlight, staring blankly at the bracelet. Maybe because I was still young. Me, over 20 years ago, didn't realize there was much wrong. I only had a vague sense of unease, then turned around and went home. Thinking about it now, I was actually quite scared at the time, because the moment I stepped inside the house, it feels like my whole body has relaxed. My legs give way. I hold on to my dad, who is waiting for me at the door. I start crying uncontrollably. I've been walking in the dark for too long, and now, I encounter something so incomprehensible. For my young self, it was already a nightmare, but the real nightmare was only just beginning. It wasn't until I finally stopped crying, that I realized when I pulled away from my dad's arms, he hadn't moved at all. Nor did he try to hug me or pat me. He didn't even say a single comforting word. On the contrary, he stretched out his hands, and adopted a defensive stance, staring at me with wide, panicked eyes. What's wrong with Dad? I hadn't even finished asking. He was so scared he fell backward, knocking over a lamp. It was as if he was desperately trying to increase the distance between us. Jutta, Jutta, come quickly. He shouted my mother's name. This series of actions scared me a lot. I had never seen him look so terrified. Instinctively, I curled up into my knees. Afraid, I could only cry quietly. About 10 minutes later, my mom came over. I heard her getting closer and closer to me, calling my name. Leah, are you there? Leah, can you come over to Mom? I looked up, a little puzzled. I saw her slowly inching her way from the bathroom. Yes, inching. She couldn't see, because she had a towel wrapped around her head. It covered her eyes. I was a bit confused, but I still got up and walked towards her. Just as I was about to take her towel off, she grabbed my hand and said, Leah. Darling. I need you to answer me honestly. You went to the lake, didn't you? Yes. I admit it. I don't want to come home too late and make you angry. She swallowed hard. It was as if she was forcing herself to calm down. Then, with a trembling voice, she said, My dear, we'll solve this problem. We must solve it, okay? She turned and went back to the kitchen. He brought a paper bag. Leah, let's play a game. She put the paper bag over my head. You just have to keep it on, and I'll keep giving you small prizes. Oh, if you want to wear sunglasses, then Mom can also give you a paper bag with 2 holes cut out for your eyes, so you can see things. But she warned me not to take the paper bag off without permission. It was never allowed. The last image before the paper bag was put on was seeing my dad gagging repeatedly in the backyard. As the bag was lowered, I was plunged into darkness. I promised my mom I would wear sunglasses permanently. She kept her promise and made 2 eye holes in the paper bag on my head. I could see that night. Dad almost didn't dare to look at me directly. He didn't even dare to, even through the paper bag. I could feel from his expression that kind of pain, and he wanted to hug me but didn't dare to come close. It really broke my heart. Mom made me a sandwich and made hot chocolate, but she forbids me from leaving the room to eat, and she just waits outside the door until I finish eating and put the paper bag back on. She refuses to come in and look at me. She absolutely won't come in to see me. Not just eating, but also washing, changing clothes, and so on. I have to do everything in my own room. That's right, they won't let me look in the mirror to see myself. Even reflective surfaces that might show my face were taped over or confiscated. I definitely asked my mother why. She just told me, Leah, that our family has been having some misfortunes lately. I just need you to wait patiently. Stay as you are now. You'll get better gradually. Is that okay? Can Imani come over to hang out with me tomorrow? No, darling. She can't see you. Until you're fully recovered. I'm sorry. I'll keep trying my best. But we promised to listen to the CD, remember? The result, of course, was still a refusal. I could only silently return to my dark bed, secretly weeping. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Tossing and turning. Finally, I decided to go to the bathroom, but I was surprised to find my door was bolted shut. They even wedged something firmly against the door. Even more surprising, I found that my parents weren't asleep. Instead, they were still arguing loudly downstairs. My father's voice was even louder than earlier tonight. I need to talk to them. I have to tell them. Wake up. Do you think they will help us? Do you think they're kind-hearted people? Mom is clearly rejecting something. What else can we do? Dad's voice grew weaker. Now it's Mom's turn to ask forceful questions. What's up? Have you forgotten how much we spent last time? I definitely haven't forgotten, but you need to give me a solution. I listened at the door and was completely confused, and they fell silent. The argument ended with Dad's final statement. Jetta, I'll go find a gun tomorrow. We'll solve it ourselves. The days went by one. I began my faceless summer. Gradually, my mother's control over me loosened. She started letting me go out for walks, but she stressed that I couldn't look at my reflection in puddles, windows, or anything else. She also started letting me touch my face, but I had to put on gloves first. Looking back now, those gloves were even thicker than oven mitts. Later on, I was surprisingly allowed to call Imani. As long as I didn't reveal anything about my illness, I could chat with her remotely. It was just this extraordinary life. It's ultimately challenging the limits of my patience. I began to show symptoms of claustrophobia, and it only got worse. It was hard to even slow my heartbeat, while I was in my own bedroom. But Mom still insisted that I spend more than 80% of my time in the bedroom. Later, I realized this wasn't just claustrophobia. It's a kind of mysterious force from deep within me. It's driving me to ignore all advice and take a look at my own face. So, that day, while Mom was cooking, I took out a Barbie doll's jewelry box. Just a slight press of that plastic latch, and the box would snap open. I would then look directly at the mirror inside. I saw my own face. If I took off my sunglasses and the paper bag quietly enough, Mom wouldn't notice me at all. The voice in my head kept repeatedly advising me against it, but for some reason, I still pressed the switch. I opened the lid. The moment the switch lock clicked, I felt it from my toes. A chill runs to the top of my head. I know deep down that what I'm doing is wrong, but I can't stop the movement of my hands. I slowly move my face into the mirror. When I saw the edge of my face, I heard some strange sounds. Laughter from a distant place, and the faint sound of thunder and rain. I slammed the lid shut. Then I heard all the sounds turn into giggles. Then it was quiet again. I could feel myself sweating all over. Cold sweat. But I still decided to try again. I summoned my courage. Slowly, I opened the lid again. This time, I heard an explosive sound. The sound was right in my room. I was panicked. I looked around. But I couldn't see anything unusual. Just as I was about to look at the mirror again, there was another explosion. Instinctively, I looked up. This time, I saw in my room all the stuffed animals moving. They all turned their heads towards me in unison. At the same time, that laughter came from afar again. I tried to convince myself it was all a hallucination. Slowly, I raised the mirror to my face. I saw my skin, ashen, dry, lifeless. I saw my throat, covered in discolored veins, like snakes crawling. As the mirror moved higher, in my peripheral vision, every poster, every toy, everything that seemed to have eyes, they all gradually turned their gaze toward me. I could see that their eyes had changed. They had become the shape of my own eyes. I saw my own chin in the mirror. It was already dry and cracked. In a moment of strange impulse, I took off my gloves to touch it, but the sensation in my fingers told me that what I was touching was a cold, lifeless bone. The next second, my mom broke through the door. It turns out she had been knocking on the door for the past few minutes, but I felt like I was hypnotized. I didn't snap out of it until she and my dad used tools to break down the door. I didn't realize it at all. Put it down now. Hurry, Mom, with her eye mask on. but she seemed to have seen the jewelry box. Screaming, she crawled over. I quickly threw the box to the floor. After hearing the sound, she took out a hammer and started hitting the jewelry box frantically. Bang, bang. She kept hitting until she had no strength left. I just huddled in the corner of the room the whole time, watching as the jewelry box shattered into pieces. Shaking quietly, Mom finally stopped moving. She casually ripped a pillowcase and covered my face with it. She held me and started crying out loud. Crying like a child. She repeatedly apologized to me, and kept reminding me to listen to her and do as she said. I completely can't understand what happened. All I did was keep apologizing. The accident that night just ended like that. The next day, Mom watched me even more strictly. Of course, I consciously followed what she said. We went out for a walk together. We watched TV together. We played the computer game The Sims together. And I can play as long as I want. As long as I don't take risks, trying to touch, or look at my own face. My dad, on the other hand, only comes home in the middle of the night every day. I don't know what he's doing out there. Preparing what? But it's clearly more than just work. This life lasted for 3 weeks. I seemed to gradually adapt. Sometimes, I would sit by the window covered with tape, looking outside through the gaps in the tape. People came and went, just like in the game The Sims that I play. Gradually, I could hardly tell whether it was reality or just a simulation. I almost forgot who I was. But those days finally came to an end. One night, after Dad came home, he didn't go to bed. I could hear them not locking my door, nor blocking the door with anything. There was a constant murmuring discussion outside. I put on my hood and sunglasses. I quietly cracked open the door. They immediately noticed me. I saw Dad let out a long sigh. He turned to me and said, "Leah, let's go out tonight." Go outside? I'm a little surprised. But you have to remain vigilant the whole time. Be obedient. Can you promise, Dad? I nodded. I asked him where we were going. He didn't give me an answer. He just said gently, "We'll make you better. Leah, just rest assured." They put a new pillowcase over the paper bag on my head. Then they put earmuffs on me. I can't see or hear anything through the layers of coverings. Breathing is quite difficult. But Mom wasn't holding me. With her by my side, I also try my best to stay strong. I can feel the change in the surroundings, through the texture of the road beneath my feet. Since getting off the car, we've walked from the smooth asphalt road to a gravel path, and finally stopped on a rough dirt road. Suddenly, I felt a chill in my feet. I only then realized my shoes were in the water. Mom took my earmuffs off. I began to hear the rustling of the surrounding forest, and the cicadas. She placed something heavy in my hands, then went around behind me. After Dad gave a command, she took away all my paper bag pillowcases at once. I finally saw the outside world. Right now, I'm by Frog Lake. And in the damp bushes, there lies the girl I once saw by the lake. She's tightly bound by ropes, struggling before me. Mom put a gun in my hand. A gun with the safety on. Listen carefully. Mom touched my shoulder, whispering in my ear, "You have to do this, okay? Just pull the trigger. Can you do it, Leah?" I saw Dad next to that girl. His eyes were closed. His hands were covered in blood. I turned my gaze back to the girl. She was practically a perfect replica of me. From her height and build to her appearance, everything was the same. Yet, there were some subtle differences. For example, her eyes were slightly farther apart. Her hair was a little shorter. And there was a red-black scar on her forehead. "This isn't fair." She suddenly spoke. Which startled me. "You clearly already made a deal. Why are you treating me like this?" Her voice was almost identical to mine when I was screaming. "Your daughter came to me voluntarily. She set me free. What's it to you?" Mom's grip on my shoulder tightened. Interrupting the girl, she said, "Don't listen to her, Leah. Just pull the trigger." The girl stopped making noise. Instead, she looked at me longingly. She sobbed again, saying, "To get you." They both chose to abandon me. "Leah, what is it about you that's so special? What makes them choose you?" I'm a little scared. Scared to the point that the heavy gun almost slipped from my hand. "Mom, what is she saying?" The girl continued, her voice trembling. saying, "Leah, do you really think you're a miracle? They just made a choice between two options. You're not a miracle. You're not. You're not a miracle." Her voice started to get rough. Her face became increasingly distorted. She became completely inhuman. Dad charged forward and kicked her hard. I instinctively dodged. I looked at Mom. But I forgot. I wasn't wearing the helmet now. The moment her gaze met my face, her eyes widened in shock. A scream was caught in her throat. Then, I rolled my eyes and fainted. Dad quickly supported me, and Mom set me aside. Instead, he grabbed my arm and fingers. He helped me line up the sights, aiming at the monster by the lake that was constantly changing shape. "You're not some kind of miracle. You better remember this. Every time you look in the mirror and see yourself, think carefully about what I just said." For a moment, the world stood still. In the sparks from the gun's discharge, I seemed to see a scene like this. On a bench by Frog Lake, I was sitting hand in hand with a sister I'd never met. We were sitting together, holding hands. She waved goodbye to me. He jumped into the lake. The scene was very brief. It flashed by in an instant. It passed through my mind but felt so real. I can't clearly remember what happened next. It seems that Dad threw the gun into the lake. Mom was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. Of course, I no longer had to wear that headgear. However, a few weeks later, my mother was diagnosed with cervical cancer. She was very strong, but she couldn't survive for more than 4 years and passed away on my 17th birthday. My father also said his final goodbye to me because of a brain artery tumor. He left me forever. Since then, I moved from Minnesota to West Virginia. I lived with my aunt. As an adult, I became a front-end design programmer. I also became a team leader. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, I've been working for over 10 years. That was last year, during a break in a client meeting. I went to the restroom. That day, for some reason, I just wanted to splash some water on my face to wake myself up, but through the mirror, I saw myself, and it seemed like there was a reddish-black scar hidden in my bangs. I didn't remember. I've never had a mark like this on my head before. The next second, my memory went blank. I have absolutely no recollection of what happened afterwards. They told me. I smashed all the mirrors in the bathroom, ran out, grabbed a cake knife from the celebratory meeting, and stabbed a client and a colleague. In the end, I was escorted out by 2 security guards. After that, I took sick leave, and began these 8 sessions of psychotherapy. That's my experience, but to be honest, I don't think this problem can be solved with just psychotherapy. Maybe there's something else. By relying on my physical body to live in this world. Maybe something still desperately wants to return to my side. Congratulations on making it this far. This is the Easter egg section of the super long collection of strange tales. Originally, the fan wanted to share with you all the B-side of Supermarket Rules Strange Tales. Unfortunately, this story really doesn't have much room for adaptation or sharing. So, I've put the title of the post here. You can go to Reddit to find and take a look. Next, I'll bring you the final story. The Summer Without a Face. A unique and absurd background setting and analysis. This story leaves too many unsolved mysteries. Looking back further, we can discover that the story originates from Saturday, a strange series by this author, the Thomas Cogg Archives. And within this archive setting, we seem to have found the faceless summer, the many answers behind it. In the story, the protagonist's father seems to have gone out to find an organization to help solve the protagonist's problem. Although the mother strongly opposed it, the plot that unfolds later still shows that the father goes out every day, dedicated to dealing with what he calls them. This organization keeps negotiating. This so-called they might be the Hatchet organization from the Thomas Coghill files. The organization was first documented in New England during the late 19th century. It's been recorded. Yes, that's right. It was the generation during the Boston Snow Night story. It is said that there was a strange disease that swept through the small villages in the northeastern part of New England, and the short-handled axe organization stepped forward to treat the people's symptoms. The people of New England were unaware of what motivated them to help the locals. They only knew they saw members of the organization. They always carry a short-handled axe used for chopping firewood. That's why they were given this nickname. As the organization gained more exposure around the world, people slowly began to understand what the first men were. From New England, this organization, which only emerged in areas with bizarre events, was linked to a mysterious metal called pristine material. Their operations were aimed at obtaining this mysterious metal. It was for a material known as pristine material, a strange and mysterious metal. Legend has it that this type of metal is a substance that has always existed on every continent and across all continents, but which humanity is currently unable to use flexibly and widely. Even stranger is that, where this metal exists, there are often frequent occurrences of terrifying and supernatural phenomena. Undeniably, the Short Axe organization, for centuries, has been dedicated to finding and developing this kind of metal. It's also estimated to be currently the most knowledgeable group in the world about this type of material, possibly the only one, where flawless specimens are abundant. They will also establish their own bases. One of the largest known deposits currently, it seems to be Juniper, a small town where strange things happen frequently. Located in Minnesota, USA, this is also the area where the Faceless Summer incident occurred. The protagonist's parents sought help from the Hatchet organization. It was no accident. Or rather, even if they hadn't sought them out, the Hatchet organization would have come to them. Where strange events occur, there's an 8 out of 10 chance an anomaly exists. Of course, at the end of the story, it is the protagonist's parents who find a way to resolve the disaster on the protagonist, but they end up sacrificing their own lives in the process. They didn't choose to truly rely on the Shorthand Axe organization. It might be just as the protagonist's mother said. Did you really think they wanted to help you? That's right, the Shorthand Axe organization has, for centuries, they helped solve so many difficult problems and supernatural events. So what is the reward for inviting them back? Or rather, what is the price? Finally, let's return to the name Thomas Cog. This is clearly not a typical American name, because the author, sad or dead, is Swedish. Tomsk is a Swedish name meaning empty forest. This name comes from a story he heard as a child, in a forest where birds sang freely, and leaves rustled. You needn't worry. But when the forest suddenly fell silent and empty, then you should be wary. Therefore, we should fear the empty forest.